Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Spartan Nation Radio. I am your host, Hondo Carpenter. It's always good to have you on. Each and every week on the program, we bring Spartan Nation senior writer Johnny Shop on. And during the college football year, we talk about the state of Michigan State football. But we also do a segment that we really love around here. That's called the good, the bad. It's called the weekly Pick Six, where John will pick the 6 most interesting games in college football. And sometimes we may get an extra point if it's a really good year. A really good week. Last week was not. And we just pick and we keep track of the ones we disagree on. If nobody wins the week, it's only worth 1 point. Then it's like a skins game in golf. You go to the next week. So last week we tied. He got Air Force over Army, but I got Utah over Washington, which I'm stunned he picked Washington again. So this week's worth 2 points, and for the year I'm up 3. Let's bring him in, Spartan Nation senior writer John Shop. John, how are you?
I am not bad at all, Hondo. Yeah, it's a bet that carries over, which a lot of folks out there probably get a feel for. Last week was an interesting week. It was a West Coast heavy week. Boy, oh boy, did we get that one wrong with BYU and Utah State. The Cougars just plain schooled Utah State. And yes, I am got to divorce Jacob Eason, Coach Pete, and the Washington Huskies. They didn't get it done. But man, oh man, what a classic. What a classic in that Battle of the Academy. Army on the goal line 4 times, 4 stops for Air Force. Monster win for Air Force. And a couple of the other ones, even Nebraska and Purdue, going against our expectations. This time, we got November football. And we are going to get this Pick Six going. These are the 6 most interesting games ever.
John,
this week.
Yes. Before we do the Pick Six, I've got to read an email from a listener that wanted me to call you out on something. Not really call you out because he wasn't disrespectful. But John Witzke emailed in and said he really hates to hear Mr. Shop spit on tradition. That's what makes college football great. It's not a sport. It's life. He took umbrage with your thoughts about neutral site games like Texas and Oklahoma. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are just different. I will give you this. The Red River Shootout is what it is. I don't think it does any service to a rivalry. If it's your biggest rivalry, to have it on a neutral site. That's just me. I would say that the Red River has a little more clout than the cocktail party game. That's a different opinion. That's okay. But if the University of Notre Dame and Southern Cal decide to play in Denver, Colorado, I'm going to have a huge problem with that. Same thing if the Spartans in Notre Dame decide to play in a neutral site. So I like that people like different things. That's okay. I just disagree completely on that one. When you look at the schedule we have this week, I think these games are better because they're on campus than they're on a neutral site.
John, do you think a few years ago, Mark Hollis and I were privately talking over lunch, and he asked me what I thought of Notre Dame, Michigan State playing in Rome in front of the Pope. He was trying to make that game happen. What would you have thought of something like that?
That's fantastic, and that is unique. I think that's worth trying. And also, to expand on it, I don't mind the cocktail party being at a neutral site. I just don't like it every year. If I were running Georgia, Florida, I would have them play at home. I would have them play in Atlanta. I would have them play at the other team's home. Then I would have them play at Jacksonville, and I would repeat the cycle. And so if you're talking about a game like Spartans v. Notre Dame, playing that game in a special place would make total sense. So would Spartans v. Trojans.
Yeah, he wanted to play the Trojans in Greece as well near the Parthenon, but he wanted to do the anniversary of the 50-50 game. Of the 10-10 tie.
10-10.
That's when he thought it would be fun. All right, let's get to your Pick Six, John.
Let's talk about Virginia Tech football. Written off. See ya. Adios. Well, look what they did last week. Close loss at Notre Dame. Wake Forest has some temperature. They're trying to get their burner off a simmer and onto a slow boil. So take your attention to the Atlantic Division, I think, of the ACC. Wake Forest at Virginia Tech.
I think Wake Forest wins it, John. I know it's an upset going on the road and winning, but I think Wake wins it. I'm a buyer in Wake.
Ooh, he's buying in Wake, and part of that is that the Tech is going to be hanging their heads after what would have been a career and a program win at Notre Dame. I think they found something at Virginia Tech. I'm going to reverse the field on this one. I'm going to take the Hokies at home. Oh, man.
I'm telling you, John, you can take VT, but I'm telling you, I really think Wake wins this one. All right, let's go to the next one.
What about this game in the Pac-10 Conference? University of Southern California, Clay Helton in trouble, new athletic director on the porch steps at Herm Edwards, and forks up Arizona State, USC at ASU. I see USC nailing it in. Give me Arizona State.
I agree, 100%. I think that USC has quit, and they're just waiting for Urban Meyer to get the job.
One place Urban Meyer would not coach is Baylor University. Another is Texas Christian. We've got Baylor coming off of what they come off of at TCU, come off of what they've just come out of. Baylor at TCU.
Baylor is going to crush them. This will be a double-digit win from Matt Rule.
Baylor is at TCU. This is what should have been the Cotton Bowl back when Michigan State played Baylor, as an FYI. I don't think so. I like TCU in another upset. Give me those dice and roll them.
All right.
How about this one? Penn State University, headed to Minneapolis. Weather is always an issue. At Minnesota, can they row the boat to the extent needed to knock off what is a warming Penn State Nittany Lion team?
No. Penn State's too much, too many athletes. I think P.J. Fleck's doing an amazing job. James Franklin has more athletes. I think P.J.'s going to get them and continue to get them. But no, I don't think so. This is a Penn State win.
Yeah, it's not 7-on-7. It's 11-on-11. Too much beef, too much power for Penn State. Penn State takes care of big business, if you will, on the road. Staying in the Big Ten, staying in that part of the country. The Iowa Hawkeyes are a football team that really must win at Wisconsin this week if they're going to have any lasting hopes of getting down what they want to in the West. The Badgers need to bounce back big time in this classic Big Ten West rivalry, Iowa at Wisconsin.
I want to be Iowa's death angel. You're not going to win the West. Wisconsin is going to roll them double digits.
Yeah, I like Wisconsin getting back on track this week and doing things in a big way. Going to slide in the extra point before the game of the week. The extra point is in the Wild Wild West. It is a clash of styles. Washington State University has been known to throw the ball. California Golden Bears can't move the ball well, but they can stop a lot of people. Washington State at Cal.
I was really hoping you'd pick this game because I love Leach. I love them going on the road. I love the win. Go Fighting Leach Cougars.
It is such a clash of styles. California is a 1-4 team. Washington State is sitting in there at 1-4 also. I am going to take the defense in this game for the only reason thinking that the Washington State quarterback is going to turn the ball over too much. Give me the upset, and yes, I'll be up late if that game is late. I'm going to take Justin Wilcox and the California Golden Bears. And that sets up the game of the year in this sport. Louisiana State Bayou Bengal Tigers and Coach O going to, where's that place? Oh, yeah, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to take on Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide. LSU at Alabama, and I will go ahead. I will inch my way out onto the ledge, and I will proclaim that the LSU Tigers are going to beat Nick Saban's team in Tuscaloosa. Joe Burrow for the weekend. Give me the Tigers.
All right. I'm going to tell you this. If Tua plays, I think Bama wins. But I'm just not sure he's playing. Man, this is a tough one. John, I'm going to go with you with the Tigers. But, man, this is hard.
Well, here's the thing. Does Alabama need to have this game, and do they use that at all in factoring whether or not to send her out there? Because if they don't think they need this game, if they think they can still get into the playoffs even if they lose, or lose relatively close, does that affect the decision making of whether or not Tua plays?
Let me go one step farther. If they lose to LSU at LSU, I don't think it matters. But to lose to them at home, I think is a big deal.
Yep. That's a tough call you got to make.
All right,
I'm out
John.
there on the plank.
All right, John. If you would, I'm going to go. I'm going with LSU for one reason. See, LSU lost their starting inside linebackers who've been playing really well. And I love Tua's the way he reads the middle of the field. So even with a hurt ankle, what do you think, John? Do you think Tua's going to play?
I do think he's going to play because I think if you look at his injury history and maybe the fact that this was not an injury that needed a surgery, but one that would be aided in terms of recovery time, I don't think this is that big of a deal. I would think that he's going to play. I just think this is the best LSU team of all time, whether to this point in the season, whether or not they win the national title, and they're going to keep on rolling. And for that reason, I've got LSU. But if I had to bet or guess, I would guess that Tua plays.
All right, I'm going with Bama. I went with Bama.
It's a tough one. We hope this more than anything. And everybody out there doing the pick six with their pen and paper hopes this. We just want a great game. We're looking for a classic, not a letdown. And I got a good feeling because Coach O and this new offense for LSU are involved, this one is going to be entertaining.
I agree, John. All right, John, before we got to get to the monkey in the room.
Yep.
Michigan State is a program, the wheels on the bus are off. It's in full-fledged default mode. Bocce's out for the year. To me, if they lose Saturday, they're not going to go to a bowl game. I'll say it right now, I don't think they're going to go. I think this is a huge game for the legacy of Mark D'Antonio. Before we get to the game specifically about Illinois, I want to start with tell people your thought of the state of the Michigan State football program.
Well, I think the article title that I have coming up kind of sums it up from top to bottom. Our football needs to check itself before it wrecks itself. And that is, in fact, a quote from the legendary Ice Cube, famous song that he put out in the early 90s. But the crux of that thing is that things need to be checked in order to stay in balance. What's gone on at Spartan football is a relatively quick deterioration that is now springing leaks and showing cracks. And what my attempt to do has always been to accurately evaluate what I see, what is actually happening, what is true, what is false. The numbers for this offense are horrible. The problems with the offense have spilled into other parts of the team. They have affected recruiting. They have affected the culture. We have seen contributors and starters literally quit in the beginning part of the season, stuff that we would never see in the past. So I think the state of this football program is nearing a crossroads where something has to be done to correct its course. It is to the point that bad outcomes and negative consequences have been realized. And to make a contrast, to talk a little bit about the work that they've done on the other side of the country at Oregon, and maybe to take a closer look, I'm going to reset the story of Brett Bielema firing his offensive line coach just 2 games after the start of the 2012 season, not only because it threatened that season, but because it was a direct threat to the core fundamental foundation of Wisconsin football.
John, I have to ask you this question, and then I want to turn our attention to Illinois. I've been reporting for months, as you know, I took a lot of criticism that people inside the university feel Mark D'Antonio is leaving. That's now seemed to become a pretty central thought on people's minds. I believe he's going to go too, but I'm not reporting it as factual. I'm going to discuss that with him at another time. But here is the question I want to ask you, John, and I'm trying to tread lightly for one reason. Mark and I used to be very good friends. We're not anymore. But I still believe he deserves respect for what he's done. But he also didn't do it as a volunteer. Michigan State has made him a multimillionaire many times over. And I'm a free market capitalist. I'm glad that he's I don't think coaches, I don't have a problem with coaches making millions. But if Mark D'Antonio decides to stay, does this university, or not do they, because they won't, but do you believe that they should go to him and say, here's the deal. Either you're firing your entire offensive staff or we're firing you before you get your bonus?
I think that Michigan State University and the football program in the year 2019 have already made the commitment to, in fact, do just that. And it's not a reflection necessarily on Mark D'Antonio, other than his great success at Michigan State, as much as it is on the overall effort, resources, and personal capital that Michigan State University puts into its football program. Because of the results of the offense over a number of years now, and more specifically, this being the second year in a row, unless something unbelievable happens in the final four games, that the offense has struggled to this extent. I do believe that someone in the athletic department and at the university would need to approach Mark D'Antonio to kind of get a feel for how this scenario would play out. As I mentioned last year and others did as well, there are fantastic options out there for Michigan State football if they needed to replace the entire offensive staff. And a lot of those probably are going to lead to extraordinarily better results than we have seen in recent time. But if you're asking me if somebody from the university presents that to D'Antonio and he refuses to remove anyone or refuses to let a new offensive coordinator come in and fill and build his own staff, I would say they need to tell him it is time to close out the greatest head coaching career in school history, and it's time to move on.
I agree with you, John. All right, now let's turn to Illinois. Michigan State has superior talent. Michigan State should run away with this game and win by double digits.
But
what do you see happening, and how big is this game in Mark D'Antonio's career? And do you agree with me, if they lose Saturday, they're not going bowling?
Well, first of all, Illinois is coming in hot and far hotter than anybody could have expected. The Fighting Illini have some fight. They get the 1-point win over Wisconsin. They rolled at Purdue. They beat Rutgers badly. And I think to the detriment of Michigan State, Lovie Smith said this is the biggest game they've had in his time at Illinois yet. Whether or not that is the case, him saying it does not help. If Michigan State gets blown out Saturday, I do believe that they're a great candidate for not going to a bowl. What I would need to see is a team fight for 60 minutes. We need to see more passion, more organization from Michigan State. We need people to put aside their egos and their rifts internally and work on being the best they can for 60 minutes, 4 different weeks at a time. So relative to the legacy of Mark D'Antonio, if they lose Saturday, I think you will get a feel that we're about to see the final chapter. Now, that's not necessarily what will happen, but it's sure going to feel like that. As bad as the ending was at Penn State, during the Penn State game in Spartan Stadium, if this team is out of the game for some reason, at some point with a healthy bit of clock left, it's going to get rather sparse in Spartan Stadium. And I think the reason is not so much the record of Michigan State or how far they've fallen since the Wisconsin bomb went off in 2016. It has to do with how the head coach has handled it since that point. If Michigan State were turning over rocks, trying everything they could, exploring new options, staying true to the commitment made when D'Antonio took the job in that introductory press conference, you would see as much support as Spartan Nation could provide. But the rock that has been allowed to accumulate and the reasons for it is what has turned off many people to this program and is what really people look at as the direction of the program going one way right now.
John,
So
very quickly, John, we've got 30 seconds, and I got to get this question in.
Sure.
Because I think it's vitally critical. As Mark D'Antonio is coming down here, what do you think of the fact that Michigan State had to return so many tickets to Michigan for them to sell to their fans because Spartans don't even want to go to Ann Arbor?
My evaluation of that is that people are ready for this process to play out and for a new chapter to begin. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you want my honest read based on 20 plus years of having a darn close eye on this thing. People know that it's time to wrap this up and go in a new direction.
I agree. Spartan Nation senior writer Johnny Shop right there. Keep an eye out for his article. It's time for Spartan football to check itself before it wreck itself. You're listening to the Spartan Nation Radio Network, and as always, we thank John for the state of Michigan State football. We'll be back. State football. We'll be back. State football. We'll be back.